This is Leonard Coleman. In December 2010, 36-year-old Kimberly Mixon was killed after an intruder entered her home in Alabama, fatally shooting the woman. Authorities say Coleman was that intruder who killed Mixon, the mother of his young son. That son, a then vulnerable 4-year-old, was the only witness to the crime and whose testimony would ultimately convict his father. But Coleman has always maintained his innocence, claiming authorities simply got it wrong, and is fighting to be exonerated. We take a look into the case. This is Unheard Voices Reports. It's a slippery slope with conflicting statements. A mother is dead, and authorities say Coleman was the last person to see her. Prosecutors say Coleman called Mixon incessantly and lashed out in a fit of rage after Mixon denied his advances. After her murder, he never called her again, leading prosecutors to believe he knew she was dead because he killed her. But Coleman says he and Mixon were on good terms, co-parenting, that day he dropped off his son at Mixon's home, and that was the last time he heard from her. At the center of this is their 4-year-old child, who testified in court on what he witnessed that day. During trial, speech experts for the defense asserted the boy suffered from a speech impediment that causes persons to often parrot what they hear. Given this, Coleman's defense maintained the 4-year-old was coached and didn't really see what he said he saw. Ultimately, the 4-year-old's testimony convicted Coleman by a majority white jury. He is currently serving life in prison. Coleman thinks he's being framed, and a new revelation may help his case. In 2020, 2 men came to Leonard's uncle and said the real perpetrator confessed to them of carrying out the murder. The problem is, the alleged confessor is now dead after taking his life. The 2 men will now testify in court on July 12th about the alleged confession. It's a beacon of hope for Coleman and his wife, who has been on a crusade to prove his innocence. Several years ago, Leonard's wife started a campaign to bring attention to the case on social media. She has amassed more than 17,000 signatures on change.org and is speaking to anyone she can to get their voice heard. No matter how you slice it, a mother is dead, a child left motherless, and a family left in mourning. The person who murdered Kimberly Mixon might be rightfully behind bars, but he doesn't think so. Mrs. Coleman sat down with Unheard Voices to discuss the case and why they believe he's innocent.
11, an all-white jury in Mobile, Alabama, found Leonard guilty of murdering Kimberly Mixon, the mother of his son, was the 4-year-old boy who was the only witness to the December 2010 fatal shooting. Coleman is currently serving life, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Coleman and his wife, they're fighting to bring attention to the case, seeking to exonerate him based on new revelations, such as claiming another man confessed to the crime. Today we have his wife to talk about her husband's case. For the record, can you tell us your name and where you're from?
Sure. I usually only use my last name just because of what I do and wanting to protect, me and my children. But I usually go by Mrs. Coleman, and I have lived in the same city right outside of Orlando, Florida for 31 years of my 40 years. So I'm right outside of I'm in Central Florida.
Okay. Would you like to tell us about your husband? Try to humanize him and what type of person he was or he is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, prior to being wrongfully incarcerated, Leonard actually had full-time custody of 2 of his children. So he was a single father to his oldest son and one of his daughters. And he actually lost custody of his younger daughter to foster care because of all of this, even though they still have a very close and tight-knit relationship and they're in touch with each other. So that was something very devastating. Leonard still owns his home. There's family living there to help him pay the mortgage while he's down. So yes. He was and is a homeowner. And he actually had no prior convictions. and was approved by the Transportation Security Administration. So he had passed a national background check at that time. And
Yes.
so he was very family oriented. And one of the affidavits of one of the men that's going to come forward on July 12th, that man noted that Leonard was always doing things with his children. And that was one of the reasons why, when he found out that Leonard was actually in for something someone else did, he really wanted to help, because he knew Leonard was a very hands on father. And so, as I know him now, what really stood out to me when I met him, one of the things is his mental resilience. He's very strong to have not let this situation change who he is. He's
Yes.
still a beautiful person and a beautiful soul, despite the system that's tried to beat all of that out of him and losing a decade of his life over this. He's also helped other people write their legal motions to try to help themselves in court. So he's been somewhat of an informal jailhouse lawyer. He's very spiritual. He has a close relationship with God. He tries to be the most connected father that he can from behind prison walls. He's helped me reach new levels of my own evolution and consciousness. So we have very deep conversations that have helped both of us grow. So
Yes.
I see him to just, be a very beautiful soul.
Oh, okay, that's wonderful. So, tell us about your husband's case. Leonard was convicted in the South in October 12th by an all-white jury for the murder of Kimberly Mixon in December 2010.
Yeah, so it was an 11 out of 12 white jury, absolutely. And so I don't really believe that goes along with our Sixth Amendment rights to be
Mhm.
tried by a jury of our peers. So I'm not really sure how a jury of 11 out of 12 white jurors would be Leonard's peers, being that
Yes.
Leonard is a black man. And he was also tried by a white judge, white DA. And so, as far as the judge and the DA, District Attorney Ashley Rich has actually been written up in other publications such as USA Today and Filter Magazine and the Mobile Lagnia, questioning her conduct in the courtroom concerning other cases. So she has a reputation that precedes her, as far as not necessarily being on the up and up according to other cases that she's processed. And then retired Judge Rusty Johnston, who oversaw his original trial, was found to have made blog posts against the Black Lives Matter movement, against immigrants. And I have those posted to my Instagram page just to show everyone that I don't really believe he was given an even playing field and a fair shot. In
Mhm.
addition to the fact that the lead detective who initially interrogated him used to have a romantic relationship and used to date the victim. And
Mm.
so that means he already didn't like Leonard and had motivation, perhaps to not investigate anyone else.
Mhm.
And so what really horrified me, and I decided to take the step to advocate for him and learn about wrongful convictions and kind of, create an approach to help him and rebrand him, was there are so many holes in his case. For
Mhm.
example, there's 1,100 pages that go along with his original trial transcript. And I
Okay.
took about 8 months to review as much as I could before deciding to stamp my name on all of this. And I
Mhm.
found in there that there's an expert that testified in court that there were no ballistics matches. And
Wow.
then an officer testified in court there were no fingerprint matches to Leonard. And
Wow.
then District Attorney Ashley Rich actually filed a motion to have the 4 year old, the only witness, declared
Mhm.
an unavailable witness. So he didn't even have to come to court and
Right.
testify, which is another violation of our Sixth Amendment rights, right? Because the
Mhm.
Sixth Amendment says we have the right to face our accuser in court. So
Yes.
Leonard was actually wrongfully convicted on out of court statements of what the detectives say the child said. And on top of that, there's more. Like, I could just keep going. This child
Mm.
was diagnosed with echolalia, which is a parroting disorder. So he was able to say what other people said, but he couldn't form his own sentences. And he was
No.
diagnosed with red flags for autism. So many things went wrong that I felt factually Leonard was railroaded in this case, that I decided to try to give him the best chance I could by launching a social justice campaign.
Oh, well, okay. Because the prosecutor was claiming that the 4-year-old was a witness to the shooting. Um, so how do you? I mean, you got a 4-year-old. Okay, he has the what you call it again?
So it's called echolalia because he can echo what other people said at the time, but he couldn't make his own sentences.
Yeah. So I'm just as I was reading the case and things of that nature about the story, I was saying, well, can I remember things at 4 years old? And I'm saying to myself, I really don't remember four too much, but I definitely remember five. And plus,
Exactly.
uh, and because his son has the deficiency, I don't even know why they would even put the little boy in that position. You know,
Yes, there is
to,
actually a key expert witness, and I have that news article posted to my Instagram page that she said his statements were actually highly likely to be unreliable because of it.
um, okay, now the prosecutor claims that Leonard made numerous calls to Mixon before the shooting, but none during or after it. So when they look at that, uh, how do you think they are looking at that or explain that? That oh, he's calling and calling, but then after the death he stops.
Yes, and of course that's something that, they would try to use in their favor. Each side is trying to win the case, and I understand that. So there was a neighbor of Leonard's that they lived right next door to each other, that this neighbor, she actually testified in court as well, that during the time this crime would have taken place, Leonard was home doing yard work.
Mhm.
So Leonard and Miss Mixon spoke the morning of because the child in question that we're talking about now they thought maybe he had a cold or needed, to go get a checkup with his doctor. Then they were talking about, okay, should we go together? And Miss Mixon said, no, you're trying to work on your house. It's okay. Come in the afternoon and I'll tell you what happened. I'll give you a doctor's note, an excuse to take to school. So that appointment was supposed to take place at 9:30 in the morning,
Mhm.
but records will show she never made it to that appointment. Now, this neighbor was speaking with Leonard starting around 7:30 in the morning till maybe 11:30 in the morning. So
Mhm.
he was home for 4 hours and then went into the shower to get ready to go pick up his kids from school. So, oh my goodness, I just lost my train of thought where I was going. Oh, how do they explain the phone calls? Because
Right.
at that time, we're thinking about this is 2010, right? So
Right.
not everyone was heavily using cell phones at that time yet, as we are now. Like no one has a house phone now. Leonard had a house phone at that time. And so
Mhm.
he had her on redial, just trying to reach her and make sure everything had gone okay at the doctor's appointment. And so he wasn't actually dialing himself.
Mm.
So yeah, that is his side that was never shared.
Okay. Now the prosecutor's theory is that Leonard lashed out in anger, okay, in frustration after losing the attention of Mrs. Dixon. Is that why you think he probably killed her, or what do you think?
So from speaking with him over the last 2 years about this, it's it's silly to think this, and I understand that it's a sensitive subject because I also lost my father tragically in 2010, and I will never know how he passed away. His body was found in the water by the New Jersey Port Authority. So I understand when you have no idea what happened, you want to fill in the blanks, and it's healing, right? To be able to put the accountability on someone. And so
Yeah.
I understand that, they could point to Leonard as the easiest person because he had a close relationship with Miss Mixon. And I think the romantic partner often gets pointed at in these
Yes,
situations
true.
without really factually evaluating whether two and two equal four. So, why I think that I believe Leonard is not only because of all the evidence I spoke to earlier, no ballistics matches, no fingerprint matches, no prior convictions, but they had an on and off relationship. So they were never like living together for the whole 5 years or engaged or talking about marriage. It was more like an open, like we're dating, right? And
Okay.
so they both saw other people during that time. So I'm wondering if he was so upset, why wait 5 years while they were both seeing other people the whole 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were never like, Leonard and I are married now. It wasn't like that. So it seems silly, in addition to the fact that he actually voluntarily went there that afternoon to make sure that everything was okay when he wasn't hearing from her.
Oh,
And so
okay.
instead of going to pick up his children, he saw police going in the direction of Miss Mixon's house, and he decided to go to her house instead to make sure everything was okay with her, and especially their son, because they had talked about him being sick earlier that morning. So it's like, if someone did something, why would they voluntarily go to check and make sure that everything's okay at the crime scene that they would have just left? Like, it doesn't make sense, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, they always seem to, they go by the person who's always the closest.
Yes.
And like you say, they really have to follow the facts and stuff because they'll make up things along the way. You know, I understand that part perfectly. Um, let's talk about some of the facts that deem your husband innocent. Let's talk about some of the things that you think that deem your husband to be innocent.
Well, one of the things that stands out to me as disturbing as is that Leonard was in the streets, so to speak. He was free for 2 months, and during those 2 months, the Mobile Police Department actually did not investigate any other suspects. So they're using basically the out of court statements of this child and the phone calls to say Leonard is the one that did this, right? So, how can you be 100% sure beyond reasonable doubt if you haven't investigated any other suspects, right? And
Exactly.
so now you're going around the Sixth Amendment to use this child's statements, but then a key expert witness is testifying that because of his speech and developmental disability, his statements are likely unreliable. And this was said in court, right? And so I'm also wondering, like, if you test all of his weapons collection in his house that he collected throughout the years from family, and
Mhm.
there's no ballistics matches, right? Then isn't that something to pay attention
That is
to?
true, yeah.
And Leonard was interrogated for 14 hours. So I can't really talk about this because it pertains to his hearing coming up on July 12th.
Yeah.
But anything that was mentioned during that interrogation, this is all I'll say to not, hurt his case in any way. Anything that was mentioned in the 14 hours he was interrogated should have been investigated before he was ever considered the prime suspect, right? Because now we find that 10 years later, in the year I met him in 2020, two
Hmm.
men stepped forward to say my best friend committed this crime and he took his own life out of guilt in 2015. So
Mm.
fast forward now to a decade later, Leonard's uncle is in a barber shop and talking about Leonard because he kind of raised Leonard. And so it's just a normal topic of conversation for him to talk about Leonard. And these two men in the same barber shop overhear Leonard's uncle. And they had no idea that he was still down for this crime because they knew he didn't do it. So
Mm.
they were very surprised to hear Leonard's uncle talking, oh, Leonard's in prison. So they go to Leonard's uncle and say, well, we know who did it. He gave us a full confession. He swore us to secrecy and said he would kill us if we ever said anything. But
Mm.
now he's not around and we want to help Leonard come home. And they decide they'll put their statements on file with a licensed investigator. So now the holes are getting filled in, the puzzle pieces are coming together. At trial, the child's grandmother stated it sounded like someone took the phone from the child and hung it up, right? And then at trial, the child's sister testified that he didn't know how to dial phone numbers by himself yet he was able to dial the grandmother and say, Mommy's dead. So how can
Mm.
he dial a phone number if the sister saying he didn't know how to dial numbers by himself yet, right? So now these men, by putting their statements on file with a licensed investigator, they're filling in all these blanks of what didn't make sense in 2010. They
Mhm.
said their best friend actually saw the child, gave him the phone, hit the redial for the last number on the phone, gave him the phone, and said, say daddy did it, and then ran out of the house.
Mm.
And he was so guilt ridden over it, according to his best friends. And we're going to hear this on July 12th at the Mobile County Circuit Court for anyone who wants to attend. That that he actually, this is why the child was able to say that Leonard did it, right? Because he didn't know how to speak by himself, but he could repeat what other people had said. And the child, according to trial transcripts, didn't say daddy did it. He said LJ did it. And LJ is what this man, the perpetrator, used to call my husband. The perpetrator knew my husband as LJ. So the child said LJ did it,
So,
according to trial
he,
transcripts. He didn't say daddy.
he never said daddy. So
No,
so what did they say about when he's about LJ? What did they actually say about that?
I don't know. I haven't gotten that far into the transcripts to know what the excuse is for that.
And also too, when the when the guys came forward in behalf of Leonard, were they given a lie detector test?
I don't know if that's legal, but no, they haven't been given a lie detector test. So basically, we have an investigator who's licensed in the state of Alabama. And
Yeah,
so in their affidavits, they say, they weren't coerced into giving these statements. So basically, it's just right now on the honor system. But
right.
they are going to be on the witness stand on July 12th and be cross examined not only by our attorney, but by Assistant DA Chris McDonough as well.
Okay. And they can't perjure themselves up there, so I'm quite sure they don't want to do that.
It's true, and they actually don't have really motivation to do this in terms of being close to Leonard because they didn't like Leonard. They were not friends when they were all in the streets together and living in the same neighborhood. They actually they didn't like my husband because my husband didn't want people in the neighborhood bringing drugs that could influence children. And so he was always trying to get them out of the neighborhood from hanging out there. And so they were at odds with each other. And so for them to step forward and say, listen, it's nothing personal. We just don't want an innocent man in jail. We know, like, they're highly likely telling the truth, especially because what they're saying matches up to the trial transcripts as well.
Yeah. Now, you also mentioned even during the trial, there was a practically all white jury. You know that never goes well. You know, history tells us, especially dealing with people of color, when you have a jury like that, it doesn't take long for them to just convict you. A lot of innocent people. That's why the Leonard case really has to be looked at because a lot of innocent people are sitting in jail or they're victimized by the system, and and you have family members and loved ones that have to pay for it because they're helping fighting to get them out or get her out, and the system is totally messed up. So I can see how in this case that you can't really trust the system, uh, and you really have to give all the effort you can to try to free Leonard. I said because you have to give him a fighting chance because uh, I guess I'm going to say everybody know the system is not for us. It's just not for us. So if they will do things, illegal things to keep us behind bars, and it could be a case here. So you really have to, put in the effort. Now, the only eyewitness is your husband's son, okay? Which his testimony ultimately convicted him. What are the new revelations that put into question the son's testimony?
Well, it's basically these two men changed everything because Leonard had already exhausted all of his appeals at the time. And so this new evidence, new discovery evidence from these two gentlemen allowed us to file a Rule 32 and get us back into court. So really everything hinges on their testimony, and our licensed investigator is actually in the process of making sure everyone is properly subpoenaed in the next few days. So but I don't foresee any issues. They actually really want to help, but it's this person actually threatened to kill Leonard, and this person actually threatened to kill Miss Mixon And now we find he's the one who unburdened his soul to his best friends to say he did it. And unfortunately, he was so eaten up by it, he took his own life, right? And not only that, our licensed investigator, after she took these affidavits, she ran a criminal background check just to kind of compare. Okay, Leonard has no prior convictions. Like, what does this gentleman's criminal record look like? He had 13 charges while he was alive, right? So we have a man with TSA background, right? Approval, Leonard, no prior convictions, single father, homeowner, right? Then we have a man with 13 criminal records. Like, that's really what's adding up here. Is that's what 2 + 2 = 4. If we try to pin it on Leonard, it doesn't add up, right?
Yeah, that's actually crazy. I mean, they should really be looking into, like you said, the criminal record of the guy. The only bad thing about it, the guy is gone. But like you said, he did give, uh, the information to the guys that he did it. So I think if those guys are put on the oath or maybe taking a lie detector, I mean, you can further find out if they are telling the truth, which will make Leonard case even better.
Even stronger, yeah.
Right. So
But to go back to something that you said, though, you touched on a very strong point. Psychology tells us that we tend to favor people who are like us. And so for Leonard to have an 11 out of 12 white jury, then there was really no relatability there for him to even have a chance at a fair verdict.
In the I want to mention here, the detective that interrogated Leonard. Okay, um, Leonard recalls him saying that he would make sure that charges stuck, and that he would become another black to statistics. Um, that's amazing in itself. Because you look at Leonard's case, and you know that this guy, you know, could actually be right of trying to make him another statistic. So you got to fight, 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 and but once you're in that system, it's kind of like once they get you there,
Yes.
then you have to, no matter if you're innocent or not, you still have to try to prove that you're not. And it's kind of like you're telling the truth, and you kind of like you got these people that aren't for people like us, and don't really want to listen to the truth because they have their own truth. So yeah, let me move on to the next question.
I agree with you. And I was reading this article in the last couple of days talking about how much discretion prosecutors have. And the one, like, part in this machine that goes left unchecked are prosecutors, right? How often do we see prosecutors on the stand for wrongful convictions? We're starting to see more police on the stand for taking lives and for using excessive force and things like that. But we don't see prosecutors very often, if at all, on the stand for wrongfully accusing people. So it's like you say, right? They have their own truth that they go with, but they can do that because there really isn't any prosecutorial accountability in our society. And that's something that needs to change so that wrongful convictions can be stopped at the source.
And it's so bad today because sometimes even when you have video footage, the prosecutors still try to go against you. Okay, so they're not for us.
No, and
they're not for us at all.
a lot of times it's a sick and twisted system because they're incentivized for conviction rates, right? So they're rewarded a lot of times the more that they convict people. And also in some systems, maybe all, that budget gets eaten up by the state. So it's not like they have accountability for, okay, that's coming out of our county's jail budget, right? This person goes off to state prison and now the state taxpayer dollars have to eat that. So really, like, there's no checks and balances where they have to be held in check for their decisions, right? They're actually rewarded for felony convictions.
Okay, now, do you believe the husband received a fair trial?
According to my husband, right, because I've been doing what I do on social media for a year and I don't want a lawsuit. So I always say, according to my husband, when he walked into the courtroom, he remembers retired Judge Rusty Johnston saying there's a murderer entering the courtroom. Here comes a murderer, right? So there's that. And then I find blog posts from that same judge from, I believe, 2016 and 2017. I'd have to go back at my page and look. And saying that the Black Lives Matter movement is a lie, right? Because police are not just doing all these things for no reason. And then he's also saying that immigrants are peasants, basically, in a different blog post. And my family, like, I'm first generation American citizen, so I found that to be disheartening. And so there's the judge, right? Then we have District Attorney Ashley Rich, who was found to be an outlier for death penalties by a Harvard report. And Leonard didn't receive the death penalty, but in this outlier report that Harvard did, Ashley Rich presided over 7 out of the 8 cases that were evaluated, right? Where she was found to be, where Mobile County was found to be an outlier for the death penalty. Ashley Rich oversaw 7 out of 8 of those cases. So we see, like, okay, already with the judge and the DA, there was maybe some possibility for impartiality there. And now we have a jury that's not a jury of his peers. And I know Mobile does not have only white people. Okay, so how hard did we fight here to get a jury selection that's representative of Mobile and that demographic, right? So now we have a detective that Detective Quinney testified at trial. This is not the lead detective that I'm talking about, right? This is a different detective. Testified in court that no other suspects were ever pursued. So, like, if you wrap up this package neatly, Leonard didn't receive a fair shot at any stage. And even Judge Johnston himself, I have a quote from the trial transcripts saying towards the end of the trial that he noticed a bunch of holes, right? But he was just going to zip up his lip and let the attorneys do their job.
How long did it take for the jury to come to their conclusion?
My goodness. See, that's a question I don't know. I think Leonard, if I remember correctly, Leonard told me everything lasted 5 days.
Oh, okay. So what are your next steps in your end goal as far as this case? Where you would like for it to go? What you would like to see? All those things that you have in your mind.
Right now, I'm in the process of collecting letters of support, opposing wrongful convictions and supporting his release. So I've collected 4 recently. I've done 2 rounds already of sending letters of support to Judge York, who's overseeing his evidentiary hearing. Now I'm doing a 3rd round of letters of support right before the hearing. So this weekend, I'm going to be writing a final letter of support of my own and putting it with the 4 that I've received in the last week and sending those off to the judge. I'm also petitioning people, keep signing his petition, keep commenting on there, keep sharing it with other people, because I'm going to send those signatures, the most recent signature count, to Judge York. I'm trying my hardest to get this out on a national level if I can, and just raise awareness for it, because I have a belief that when there's a light on what they're doing, that they can't hide so easily, right? And I follow a lot of justice pages because of what my page does, and I've been seeing so many exonerations lately, so many releases, and it's very encouraging to me. But a lot of times these guys are getting out because they have public support or they have the backing of an innocence organization, right? I just interviewed Termaine Hicks on Sunday and posted it to my own page, because I also do things to raise awareness and promote, right? Awareness for wrongful convictions and awareness for my husband. Termaine was down for 19 years. And it wasn't until the Innocence Project partnered with the Philadelphia Conviction Integrity Unit that he was able to finally get out. So 2 decades of his life lost. But it takes that backing, right? So I'm trying to get as much backing. I'm trying to get as many people to show up to the hearing on July 12th as possible so that there's a visual there for the DA and the judge to see people really care about Leonard. They care about
Exactly.
wrongful convictions. His life matters. So that's where I'm at right
So
now.
if you want, like, you have unheard voices, listeners will be listening to this, and if they need to sign or help you with this petition, where would they go?
So our petition on change.org is change.org/free Leonard Coleman. So FREELEONARDCOLEMAN. And then our Instagram is justice for, like, FOR Leonard Coleman. And also for anyone that wants to go to the hearing, the evidentiary hearing, and hear these men testify that someone else committed this crime, it'll be July 12th, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time in courtroom 6600 for Judge J.A. York at the Mobile County Courthouse in Alabama.
Wonderful. Okay. So, Mrs. Coleman, I would like to thank you very much for sharing the information about your husband. Um, I'm hoping that Unheard Voices will also be a voice that could be used to get the information out to the people, to let them know exactly what's going on.
Yes.
Because, like you say, half the battle is getting the information out there and and letting people hear it. And I think once we do that, I feel also that Leonard's voice will finally be heard, and that he can receive a fair trial, or at least get exonerated.
Yes.
So I would like to thank you one more time for being here with Unheard Voices,
Thank
and
you.
I would like to invite you back again. Um,
Absolutely.
Once the case, further the case, or you need to talk to me about things that's going on in the case, you're always welcome back.
Thank you. And hopefully next time we'll be with Leonard, right?
Oh yes, that would be wonderful. Because like I said, being a black man, being out there, it's rough.
Yes.
So when they try to get you, once they get you in there, then you got to do all this fighting to get out.
It's an
So
uphill battle. Once you're
yeah,
actually convicted, you have
yeah.
a better shot pre-conviction. Once
Mhm.
there's actually conviction, it's near impossible to get out without a lot of help.
Well, we're going to stay prayed up, Mrs. Coleman,
Yes, that's
and
right.
then throw a lot of prayers, and get people to hear it and get people involved, um, because people need to know about your husband and why he was wrongly convicted. With
Yes.
many other people that's out there. So hopefully we can get him some justice.
Yes, there's so many. There's too many. This happens with way too much frequency. And I just thank you so much for the platform to share his story.
All right, and you have a blessed day today, and I will be talking to you again.
Yes, for sure.
All right. Bye bye now.
Bye.